Judge John Roberts and Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson confront Jasmine Crockett, shocked on live. The cameras were rolling, and millions of viewers tuned in. It wasn't often that Supreme Court justices sat side by side on a live broadcast. But this wasn't an ordinary day. Judge John Roberts, the Chief Justice himself, and Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, the court's newest member, were seated under the sharp studio lights. Across from them sat Representative Jasmine Crockett, calm, poised, and ready. The host barely had to ask a question before Judge Roberts leaned forward, his tone firm but not unkind. "Representative Crockett," he began, "many argue that your style, your fiery words, your bluntness, is too much for public service. Don't you believe restraint is a necessary part of leadership?" The studio grew tense. Everyone expected Jasmine to fire back instantly, but she didn't. She paused, folded her hands gently, and smiled. "Chief Justice," she said softly, "you're right that restraint has its place. But so does honesty. I don't speak loudly because I enjoy the sound of my voice. I speak loudly because there are millions who are never heard at all." That moment landed heavy. Even Roberts leaned back, thoughtful. But it was Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson who leaned in next. "Congresswoman Crockett," she asked, her voice measured yet probing, "I've spent my life in courtrooms where voices carry power. You talk about representing the unheard. Can you give us an example of when that meant more than politics, when it was simply about humanity?" The question pierced deeper than anyone expected. Cameras zoomed closer. Jasmine looked down, took a breath, and then shared a story she rarely told. She spoke of a young man from her district, a teenager wrongfully arrested for a crime he didn't commit. His mother came to Jasmine in tears, broken, certain that her son's life was already over. Jasmine had no cameras then, no headlines, no political spotlight. She just had a choice: to step in, or to step back. She chose to fight. She worked day and night, unpaid, digging up evidence, finding witnesses, demanding the truth be seen. Weeks later, the boy was cleared. His record wiped clean, his future given back to him. Jasmine's voice trembled as she finished. "I didn't save him because it made me look strong. I saved him because his mother reminded me of my own. That boy deserved to dream again. That, to me, is what leadership is about." The silence that followed was electric. Roberts, known for his caution, cleared his throat, but his usual formality cracked into something more human. "You remind us," he admitted, "that sometimes the law is more than words on paper. Sometimes, it's the heart behind it." And Judge Jackson, herself no stranger to struggles of being heard and seen in spaces not built for her, nodded slowly. Her eyes softened as she replied, "Congresswoman, I asked for an example. What you gave us was a reminder. A reminder that justice without compassion is hollow." The audience, which had been holding its breath, erupted into applause. It wasn't the sound of politics, it was the sound of shared humanity breaking through the noise. The host, stunned, barely managed to close the segment. But before the cameras cut away, something unexpected happened. Roberts, usually the embodiment of restraint, reached across the table and shook Jasmine's hand with genuine respect. Judge Jackson followed, her words carrying weight that went beyond the studio. "Keep speaking for those who cannot, even when the room grows uncomfortable." And Jasmine, her voice calm but resolute, answered, "As long as I have breath, I will." The broadcast ended not with confrontation, but with connection. Across America, and even across oceans, people who tuned in didn't just see judges and a congresswoman. They saw human beings, leaders capable of disagreement, yet also capable of respect, empathy, and growth. It was a rare moment in public life. Not a clash, not a performance, but a lesson. A lesson that compassion, even under the brightest and harshest lights, still has the power to disarm, to heal, and to inspire. And for those who watched, the message lingered long after the cameras went dark. The strongest voices are not the loudest, but the ones that speak truth with love. The segment might have ended, but the ripple was only beginning. That night, clips of the exchange flooded social media. Some expected heated debate, a clash of egos between the nation's highest judges and a sharp-tongued congresswoman. Instead, what people saw was something far rarer: respect, vulnerability, and compassion exchanged in real time. In living rooms across the US, the UK, and Canada, families leaned forward and talked. Some parents used Jasmine's story of the young man to remind their children that even when systems fail, people can make a difference. Teachers played the clip in classrooms, not as politics, but as a lesson in courage. And many who had felt invisible, people with no wealth, no platform, no voice, saw in Jasmine a reflection of their own worth. But the most unexpected response came the next morning. The mother of that young man, the one Jasmine had once defended, called into a local radio show. Through tears, she told the world that her son, now in college, had been watching the broadcast. She said he turned to her and whispered, "She didn't just save my record, Mom. She saved my hope." That moment hit harder than any applause. Because it wasn't about politics anymore. It was about humanity. Even Chief Justice Roberts, who was often careful to avoid the court of public opinion, privately remarked to a colleague, "Sometimes, we forget that justice isn't measured in precedent or rulings, but in the lives that are changed because someone cared enough to fight." Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson later shared in a quiet interview that Jasmine's story reminded her of her own beginnings, nights of studying when the world doubted her, the faces of clients she once defended when no one believed they deserved a chance. Jasmine's words had awakened something personal. And Jasmine, she carried on with her work, not as a politician chasing headlines, but as a woman grounded in purpose. She didn't see the viral applause or the trending hashtags as victory. The victory was that people, ordinary, everyday people, were reminded of their power, their dignity, and their right to be heard. The confrontation that was expected to be sharp, even combative, had turned into a moment of unity. The twist no one predicted was that kindness, not cleverness, not volume, not power, was what shocked everyone watching live. And that, in the end, was the lesson that lingered. Because real strength isn't in how loud you speak, but in how deeply your words touch another's soul. Later that evening, when the studio lights had dimmed and the applause was only an echo in her memory, Jasmine sat quietly in her office. The chaos of politics, calls, emails, staffers rushing in and out, seemed far away. For the first time all day, she allowed herself a deep breath. On her desk sat a small stack of letters she often kept tucked away. Handwritten notes from people she had helped over the years. Most were simple. "Thank you for believing in me, you gave me a second chance," but tonight, they carried more weight. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from the young man's mother. Just 5 words. "He's watching. He's proud." Jasmine closed her eyes, tears she had been holding back all day finally welling. She whispered to the empty room, almost like a prayer, "That's why I keep going." A knock at the door interrupted the quiet. Her aide peeked in, smiling. "Congresswoman, there's someone here to see you." In walked the young man himself, taller now, older, with the confident stride of someone who had been given a second chance and refused to waste it. He wore a college sweatshirt and carried a backpack. His eyes met Jasmine's, and for a long moment, no words were needed. Finally, he spoke. "I just wanted to say, thank you. For not giving up on me when it would have been easier to." Jasmine stood, her voice unsteady. "You don't owe me thanks. Just promise me one thing. When you see someone else falling, you reach down and pull them back up. That's how we keep the chain unbroken." The young man nodded, his face set with determination. "I will." They shook hands, but it felt like something far deeper, a passing of strength from one generation to the next. As he left, Jasmine sat back down, the weight of the day settling into something lighter. She realized that what had unfolded live on national television wasn't about judges or politics or applause. It was about planting seeds of courage and compassion, one story, one person, one act of kindness at a time. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual noise. Inside, Jasmine wrote in her journal, "Leadership is not power. Leadership is service. And service, when rooted in love, can change the world." She closed the book, smiled to herself, and whispered, almost as if speaking to the future, "I will keep speaking, for as long as I have breath." And somewhere in that quiet moment, the lesson of the day settled like a gentle truth. Real justice begins not in courtrooms or chambers, but in the simple act of choosing compassion, again and again. Weeks passed, but the moment never faded. Across the country, people still spoke about the broadcast. Not because of the confrontation, but because of the connection. One evening, Jasmine was invited to a community forum at a local high school. The auditorium was packed. Not just with students, but with parents, teachers, and neighbors. Everyone wanted to hear not the politician, but the woman who had reminded even Supreme Court judges that compassion was strength. As Jasmine walked on stage, she noticed something in the crowd that made her pause. The young man she had once defended was sitting in the front row, this time with a group of classmates. They leaned forward, listening, waiting. He wasn't the scared teenager she remembered. He was now a leader in his own right, standing tall, inspiring others. When it was her turn to speak, Jasmine didn't talk about laws or bills. Instead, she told a story about resilience. She spoke about how kindness travels like a ripple in water, touching people you may never meet, shaping futures you'll never see. She reminded the students that their voices mattered, no matter how small the world tried to make them feel. And then something extraordinary happened. At the end of her talk, the young man stood up. With quiet confidence, he addressed the crowd. She fought for me when I had no one. Because of her, I'm here today. And I promise, I'm going to fight for others the way she fought for me. The room fell silent, then erupted into applause so loud it shook the walls. Jasmine felt tears sting her eyes, but they weren't tears of sorrow, they were tears of hope. Later that night, as she sat alone in her car before driving home, Jasmine reflected on it all. The judges, the cameras, the boy, the mother, the forum. And she realized something profound. She wasn't just speaking for the unheard anymore. The unheard were beginning to speak for themselves. And that, she thought, was the true victory. The story had started with confrontation, but it ended with continuation. Proof that compassion multiplies, that leadership is a torch passed, not held. With a quiet smile, Jasmine started the engine, whispering the same words that had become her mantra. As long as I have breath. And in that moment, it was clear, the story wasn't ending at all. It was only beginning.